With EBO2 only a couple weeks old, it feels pretty crazy that we're already talking about the pre-releases for the next set. What a time to be alive. In this video, we're going to be covering everything you need to know about the OP11 pre-release, event info, general tips for the pre-release format, as well as some top techs that I've picked out for OP11. Welcome to my ultimate guide for the OP11 pre-release. Firstly, the event info. This event is going to run from May 30th, June 5th at Bandai stores and your LGSs. Make sure you check with your LGS on when their exact date is. They may already be up on the Bandai app by the time this video goes live, but I'm not sure. Stores can choose to run these as constructed events or sealed events. I massively prefer running these as sealed. Constructed is the format that we play every week at locals, online, on the sim, or at regionals. So I think having a chance to play sealed keeps it fresh. The vast majority of this video is going to be covering the sealed format for OP11. So if your store's doing constructed, I'm sorry. You're going to get a Mihawk promo for participating, as well as a copy of the Rainbow Luffy leader, who we'll talk about in a minute. Getting these both guaranteed is pretty nice. The Mihawk promo is an option in Buggy. However, on the same day as the OP11 set comes out, we're getting a Buggy starter deck. So who knows if this sees play. You're also going to get a pre-release pack for participating, and this is going to contain two commons or uncommons that have a pre-release stamp similar to this Nico Robin that you can see here. And if you win, you're going to get the hollow foil winner stamped version of this Mihawk. Previously, we got the Buggy. Before that, we got the ST13 Leader Alts. This Mihawk looks really nice. I'm not sure it's competitive though. What do you need to bring? If this is your first time at pre-release, don't forget, you need to bring sleeves, you need to bring dice, you need to bring a playmat, and you may need to bring leaders. Check with your LGS what format they're doing, because some stores will do, you can choose any leader from your binder or from the packs that you open. Other stores will force everyone to use the Rainbow Luffy leader. Generally, I prefer the ones where everyone uses the Rainbow Luffy leader, because it feels a lot fairer to new players who might not have some of the more meta old leaders. And also, it enables some pretty wacky combos to take place, which is really cool. So, sealed. You're going to open 6 packs. You're going to build a 40 card deck, not 50 like standard. This is a 40 card deck. And there are no color restrictions. So what this means is if you choose to play red Luffy leader from starter deck 1, you can include blue cards, you can include black cards, you can include purple cards. No problem. There are also no card count restrictions. So if you pull 5 of the same vanilla, you can include them all. And the rest of your pulls are your sideboard. So if you play a game, whether you win or lose, if you find a card that you didn't read properly when you were building your deck, or just doesn't work how you thought it did, then you can just take that out and put something else in so that your deck's not dead. It's sort of understood that these cards are new to everyone, and these events attract more new players than usual. So it's just about being nice and making sure everyone has a good time. So general tips for the pre-release format. Board control is very, very important. Of course, this is the case in constructed as well. However, in pre-release, big characters are very common. Lots of vanillas are in these decks, so the characters are just larger than average, so you're going to need more counter than average. Blockers are obviously incredibly powerful in pre-release because there is way less removal. In standard, constructed, everything's getting removed or rested by things like Hody Jones, Lucci decks, finger guns, who knows. In sealed, there is removal, but much, much less. So blockers generally do get the chance to block. And also know when you've lost the board. Setting up to win in 2 turns is as valuable in this sealed format as it can be in constructed. As much as playing the board is important, sometimes your opponent will just have better cards than you or have a better curve than you, or you're just not seeing your 2Ks, for example. Let's talk about Rainbow Luffy. So Rainbow Luffy is this guy over here. He's considered a leader with all colors, all names, and all types. This means that your leader or type locked cards will work with him. For example, this Jaguar D Salt as a trigger. If your leader is Nico Robin, play this card. The Monkey D Luffy has every name, so that counts as Nico Robin, and you can use the trigger of Jaguar D Salt. For another example, this is one that I really like, is the Kung Fu Dugong. This card says, if you have a Kung Fu Dugong in play other than this character gains blocker. Well, Luffy has every name, so that includes Kung Fu Dugong, and he procs the effect of your Kung Fu Dugong character. Obviously, neither of these are in OP11, but there are type and leader locked cards that are. And we'll cover those as we go through the next few slides. In terms of if your store is not doing Rainbow Luffy format, these are some of the best leaders. I think Red Sanji is broadly just the best leader. Giving everything Rush is insane. You're going to be playing a lot of vanillas in this format, so you're not having that many on plays. And this effect of having Rush, there's so few Rush cards in sealed that this Sanji just kind of gets crazy value. If you don't want to play Sanji, Captain Kidd is an old favourite. He can restand and attack again. It's nothing too crazy, but it is quite reasonable. Bonnie is a defensive option and probably the best defensive option. And if you just like turning your brain off and slamming face, you can play Yamato. Although I think in this set in particular, Yamato is quite a lot weaker for reasons that will become apparent as we move on. So in terms of the new leaders, Kobe, Jinbei, Shirahoshi, and Luffy are all far too locked to a particular archetype to be worth playing. Katakuri is interesting, but until you get quite high on Don, you basically don't have a leader effect. So I think he's out the window. Nami interests me, and I do want to try playing with this Nami. For the first effect, drawing you extra cards when your opponent takes life, pretty cool. And also, the second effect, just making you a 7k leader defensively. This seems really interesting. I'm not sure how good this is going to be, because there are a lot of 5/7s in this format, actually. But this will save you a lot of cards in theory, and draw you some. The obvious downside being that you're 4 life, and you won't get to give everything Rush like Sanji can, but I am quite interested to experiment with the Nami. So, a quick rundown, what do you want to include in your deck? Firstly, all of your 2Ks. I will put some asterisks on this. There are a lot of 2Ks in this set, like a serious amount of 2Ks. So this may be one set where this rule doesn't hold up. All vanillas. Vanillas are great stat line cards. They're going in your deck. All cards with vanilla stat lines, I like to call these Vanill-ish cards. An example of this that you might be familiar with is the 3/5 Rush Zoro. He's not a vanilla because he doesn't have counter, but he does have a vanilla stat line. And obviously good cards. I've covered some of them at the end of this video. You might disagree with me on what is obviously good, but these are just my opinions. And after that, use your intuition to fill out the last slots. You're gonna probably end up putting a few really quite poor cards in towards the end of your draft. At least that's how it's often worked out for me. So read the cards and do your best. And of course, there is that sideboarding rule if you do make a mistake. So 2Ks, part 1. In this set, we have 4 common 2Ks. On average, you should expect to pull 1 copy of each common 2K in your 6 packs. None of these really have useful effects, but you're probably going to include them unless you get a serious amount. These are rares, these 5. Again, none of these have incredible effects. The Reiju has a decent stat line, and the Zeus can do a bit of removal, which is pretty cool. Do know Aramaki, if you're playing Rainbow Luffy, will work because your leader is Navy, so you could give one of your Navy type characters the ability to attack actives. Prince Groose isn't going to come up, and Caribou is a blocker, but he's very, very costly. These 4 are uncommon. Again, none of these really have crazy effects. The opponent's not going to be playing that many counter events. The opponent definitely not going to have that many triggers. Very good is just a vanilla to all intents and purposes. And Charlotte Montdor is very bad. Now, this is what I'm giving a new classification of cards. These are vanilla 2Ks. So vanillas are, for example, a 5/7 with 1k counter. A vanilla 2k is, for example, a 5/6 with 2k counter. You swap 1000 power for 1000 counter. These are all really, really good. You're going to include these in your deck. Traditionally, the 2Ks that you play in sealed are all basically worthless. However, these are just pretty good cards. Obviously, you'd rather play a 5/7. Playing a 5/6 is certainly a lot better than doing nothing. We've got 7 5/6 and 6 6/7 2Ks that are vanillas in this set, which is really going to help you fill out your curve. And this is why I generally think decks are going to have more 2Ks and be more consistent in this format. It's also worth noting these are all uncommons. To go through how the ratios work for 6 packs. Commons, you get 1 of each on average. Uncommons, you get 0.5 of each on average. And rares, you'll probably get maybe 1 rare 2K between these 5. Maybe 2. So let's do a comparison to OP10. In OP10, in the set, there was 1 common 2k, 8 uncommons, 3 rares, and 1 SR, and I gave an estimated average of 6. This basically held up for the experience that I had pre-release, and also some of my homies. We were sort of ranging between 4 and 7. OP11, you have 4 common 2ks, 17 uncommon 2ks, 5 rares, and no SRs. So my estimated average for this set is going to be 12 to 13 2ks, which is nuts. That's like high end of a constructed deck. And that's why I think you might not include all your 2ks. Some of these, like, pretty poor ones, cards like Gotti, Stroizen, and Charlotte Montdor, you might not end up including these. But the vanilla 2ks, these are just the best ones. Now, regular vanillas, we have 146 in Mocha, 457s, and 368s. Not too many. In OP10, there were way more vanillas, but that's because they didn't have these vanilla 2ks. In general, you can see there are a lot of 5 costs between these two slides, so I do think generally going first is going to be quite good. Although going second is going to be no bad thing because there are a lot of 6 costs too. Now let's talk about some Vanill-ish cards. This is, like I said at the start, these are vanilla stat-line cards but with a downside. And this is the Pokemon Vanill-ish. He's pretty cool, I like him. So in terms of 5/7s, you got 4 of them. Neptune doesn't really work, because whilst your leader in Rainbow Luffy will be Shirahoshi, you can't flip a life face down. Same reason for Shakade. Charlotte Pero is not going to be very good unless you're playing Katakuri for some reason, because you're not going to know what's on the top of your opponent's deck. This Luffy, however, is very good. He's a 5/7 vanilla blocker with counter. He just has this condition: if you have 5 or more cards in your hand, this can't attack. In pre-release, this is fairly reasonable to play around. So you've just got a 5/7 blocker with counter that can attack. It's pretty nuts, honestly. We've got 146, that's Gyodome. He's fine. In Rainbow Luffy Leader, he can attack characters immediately, which is pretty cool for a bit of board clear. We've got 268s. Jinbei gives himself the ability to attack characters immediately, and in Rainbow Luffy format can rest a 5 on play, which is probably, if you get this, it's probably the best play on 6. You can come in, rest your opponent's 5 on play, and especially if that was a 5/6 vanilla 2k, you can probably take it out, which is pretty nuts. Judge doesn't do much, but he can buff some other Germa characters. Lin is a big 10-12 rush option in Rainbow Luffy, which is pretty cool. Her effect does nothing, but 10-12 rush is nothing to be scoffed at. Koribu is a 3/5 with counter. You don't really want to play him out, though, because you do have to trash a card when you do. And Fukaboshi is mostly just a vanilla 3/5. These effects do technically fire, but it's not great because you have to rest your leader or the stage, which the stage isn't great. Moving on to blockers, and you're going to realistically include every blocker that you get in your deck. We've got a couple of conditional chump blockers. We've got the Charlotte Anana. She needs another Big Mom Pirates type card. Ripper, who needs another Black Navy type card. And Pedro, who needs you to have 4 or less cards in your hand. Think of these, the Pedro is going to be the most reliable. These other 2, less so. Whether you play these is going to just depend on your card pool. We also have Briscola. This is a true chump blocker. As well as Beige. Beige gives you protection for your Supernovas, but the Supernovas were really in set 10, so this effect isn't really going to come up much. And Caribou is a 2k that is a blocker. But like, man, you have to trash 2 cards to play this guy. He kind of sucks. Would you have 3 3-cost blockers, all of which don't really do anything. Shiali needs you to have a face-up life card to get her effect, which isn't going to happen. Praline rests a 1, which isn't going to happen. And Brooke bottoms a 1, which isn't going to happen. These are realistically just chump blockers that cost a bit more. Moving on to some more meaningful blockers, we've got 4 5k power blockers. Shu is actually pretty cool. If your opponent just happens to have a slash character that's going to attack, he can become a 10k blocker for that battle, which is kind of funny. He's the guy in the anime that rusted Zoro's sword and then was never seen again. Hannibal can play an Impel Down character, but you don't really want to. Yonji is actually pretty cool. His effect, he can't be KO'd or rested by opponent's effects, but you do have to have all Germa Kingdom type characters, so it's probably not going to fire, but he's still a blocker. And Smoker in sealed is realistically just a blocker. This effect is not going to come up, really. We've got a couple chump blockers, but do have useful effects. Borsalino is a 3k chump blocker. You can rest him, and then one of your Navy leaders or characters, which includes Rainbow Luffy, can attack active characters, which is pretty cool for a bit of board clear. Doll trashes a card, and then in Rainbow Luffy format, because you are Navy, gives something minus 6,000 power, which is kind of bonkers. 6,000 power debuff for one card, and you get a chump blocker? That's pretty crazy. We have 3 6k power blockers. We've got the Megado. He's only relevant for Rainbow Luffy format, but does become a 3/6, which is a very good stat line. We've got Chon Mage, who can't really restand himself with this activate main, but he is a 5/6 blocker. And 6k blockers in general, just to make that nice point clear, are very good because they can free block 5s. Free blocking, for example, your opponent's leader swing is just pretty valuable, right? You get extra card advantage. We also have this Nami. She's an SR, so you probably won't get her, but if you do, this gives you a really nice cycle, and then is a 6k blocker. We've also got these 3 stronger blockers. We've talked about Luffy. Ichiji's effect isn't going to come up, but he is a 7/7 blocker, which is quite large. And this Katakuri is one of the best cards in the set, both for sealed and constructed. This is just an 8/8 blocker that restands itself. Like, that's just bonkers, man. This card is crazy in constructed. If you've seen like the blue-purple Luffy deck or the purple Katakuri deck, you'll know all about this 8-cost Katakuri. But if you get this in sealed, this guy's crazy. In terms of events, these are sort of the ones that you might want to activate main. Gear 2 can give you a ramp in Rainbow Luffy, and can also just be a 3k counter event, which is pretty good. Honesty Impact removes anything, basically. It can also help you potentially remove 2 things. If your opponent has something with 6,000 power standing up, you can put the -4 on one character, remove the standing up character, and then attack into a weakened character, which is kind of cool. And Excalibur can provide a little bit of spread out debuff to help you clear your opponent's board easier. In terms of counter events, there's actually a surprising amount of good ones this set. In OP10, counter events weren't that great, but in this set, I think they're a lot more powerful. Both Gum Gum Redhawk and Elephant Gatling have some pretty cool activate main effects, combined with counter effects being a 3k for your leader, similar to the Gear 2. Vagabond Drill gives 3k power, but only to Fishman or Merfolk characters or leaders. Of course, this will work with Rainbow Luffy. And then additionally, you can rest a 3, which could hit a chump blocker or even a 3/5 Vanill-ish card. Clay Web only gives you 2k power for the battle, but does give you 1k power for the turn. So this is a 3k power for the battle, and then 1k for the turn for 2 Don. Could be interesting to try out. You're Not My Type and Gum Gum King Cobra are both 4k power counter events just for 1 Don. Very Rand Beam-esque. You're Not My Type only playable in the Rainbow Luffy. Gum Gum King Cobra playable in anything, but you do have to meet that condition of having 4 or less cards in your hand. Here are a few of my picks for the obviously good cards. Sanji is not that crazy. Like, he's probably not going to be KO'd by an opponent's effect, but he does come down and bounce a 5,000 power character, which is pretty cool. You could bounce your own thing if you played out like a chump blocker, and now you've decided you want it in your hand. And of course, you can bounce one of your opponent's 5,000 power characters. Lord of the Coast, it just freezes one of your opponent's guys. It's pretty good. Enough said. This is like the 5/6 Bonnie, but just -1 cost, -1,000 power. Arlong is only really viable for Rainbow Luffy leader, because you do have to be a fishman. You do have to meet all these other conditions as well, but this just being a 4/7 is very, very good. Roronoa gives you Arrested Don every turn for free, making him a vanilla on play, and get more value turn after turn. Hibari is brilliant for battling for board. And then, of course, these 2 secret rares are both nuts. Kobe, after he's been in play for a turn, because he won't be able to sack characters immediately, unless you give him that effect with another character's effect, will just make your leader 6,000 power for the rest of the game, which is pretty crazy, and he's an 8/9. And this Monkey D. Luffy is pretty much the only rush option in this set. There is a distinct lack of rush, but it also bounces a 4 and gives Arrested Don for just 1 card. Both of these are nuts. Will you get them? Probably not, but if you do, make sure you include them. Now let's talk about some interesting techs. So starting at the top, Peacock. And this may be translated as Kujaku in English. Normally in these videos, I completely warn against playing any searchers. However, there's a lot of navy in this set. Both red and black are predominantly navy. So you may well end up with a good amount of navy cards so that Kujaku is going to hit. You also, at the end of the day, have this activate main where you can just give something else 1000 power. So you're not really losing much, and potentially you're getting a card and 1000 power. Kuzan is pretty cool. The on-play doesn't really matter, but giving your Rainbow Luffy leader, when attacking, the ability to attack active characters is quite unique. Could enable you to starve and play board really, really heavily. Zephyr is a card that is not very good. However, in sealed, if your opponent just happens to have a special attribute character, you can give it minus 5000 power when attacking, which is crazy. And I mean, look at some of these cards, right? Kuzan, he's special. We hop back to the Vanillas. 2 of these are special, Black Maria and Bins. The Vanilla 2Ks, we've got Niji, he's special, and Bartolomeo, he's special. So whilst this obviously isn't the craziest card in the world, giving a 5k debuff just because your opponent happens to have a trait seems pretty good, and a 5/6 stat line is no bad thing, right? The Fishman Island in Rainbow Luffy, you could play this. It will let you proc some of your Fishman to Sea King type effects that require you to flip a life face down, and it can give you some buffs. It's really going to depend on how many Sea King and Fishman type characters you get, but it's not that bad. Papag is actually kind of cool. In Rainbow Luffy, he counts as Kami, so this is just a 1-don draw 2 trash 2. Nothing too crazy, but that bit of cycle could get you closer to the cards that's going to win you the game. This Nico Robin's kind of cute, gives minus 2000 power until the end of your opponent's next turn, very similar to the 8-cost Rayleigh effect, so it gives you a bit of defense. This Carrot is a top 3 stacker that can put on the top or the bottom, and then you can trash it to get 1000 counter. So this is always 1000 counter, but also just gives you a top 3 stack, which is pretty cool. And Jaguar D Soul, again, in Rainbow Luffy format. You can see why I like Rainbow Luffy, right? So many of these cards just work better with that leader. You can activate his on-play because your leader is Nico Robin, and then you can just draw a couple cards. And drawing cards in Prerelease, that's pretty crazy. In general, OP11 specific tips, there's a very high 2k count. As we mentioned earlier, there are a lot of 2ks. So swinging 5 and 7, like you would do in Constructed, is probably more useful than 6. For set 10, I highly recommended swinging 6, but for set 11, I'm going to recommend swinging odd numbers. There's a very high blocker count, so I think games are likely to take longer than in previous pre-releases. It's no bad thing, but it does mean you're going to have to think more towards that late game. And there's a very high quality of 2ks due to vanilla 2ks. Decks will be slightly less powerful because there's less true vanillas, so all the stat lines are bumped down a little bit. However, vanilla 2k is just going to increase your consistency of having a good play in that mid game and being able to play out 2 good characters towards the late game. Like I said before, traditionally the 2ks in sealed have been very, very poor, so having these vanilla cards I think is quite exciting. Overall, I think this is a very strong card pool, and it will be quite a different experience from OP10. But I'm excited, I'm really looking forward to this. So if you're going to pre-release, good luck on your pulls, good luck on your booster boxes, and I hope you all win. Let me know in the comments below how your pre-release goes. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.